Vaheguru, 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 Vaheguru.
In terms of religious views for each of the respected faiths, what is the view of monogamy in a medicinal sense? So I'm going to start that one off with Dr. Knight on my far right.
Okay, I suppose if you're going to take the Bible as a standard for Christians, you've got a passage in Genesis, first book of the Bible, which talks about the man leaving his wife, his family, and the woman leaving her family, and the two becoming one. And the idea within the Bible is one man, one woman for life. And if you go beyond that, it starts getting very complicated.
Dr. Stern?
Polygamy used to be permitted in Judaism, but about 1,000 years ago, a rabbi called Rabbi Gershon made a temporary prohibition, which was intended to last for 1,000 years, which finished not all that long ago. But meanwhile, the rabbis have decided that the restriction is permanent. So in current Orthodox Judaism and any other form of Judaism that I know about, they restrict monogamy. I'm not quite sure about the medical implications of this.
Okay, Dr. Afaka?
I'm trying to make it as much a medical question as I possibly can.
Yeah.
But from the Islamic point of view, the most fundamental sort of part of all this is the concept of hifz al-nasab. What that really means, it's a higher objective of Islam, and what that really suggests is that the family unit is kept intact. And there's a recognition within that there are certain women who have not had a very good marriage, and they need that sort of financial, loving support. For that reason, polygamy is still considered a permissible act in Islam. Having said that, in many domains it's not encouraged unless there is a very valid reason. So there is a variability depending on which particular cultural sort of country you go to, and various elements to that as well.
And Jabrad?
Sure. Okay, so in the main, Sikhism would say the monogamy is recommended. The first quote from Guru Granth Sahib Ji says that it should be one soul in two bodies. So don't say one soul in three bodies. So you can kind of get the idea that it's supposed to be a man and a woman, and it's marriage. And also by Gurdas Ji, who's one of the famous scholars of the time of the Gurus, he says that to have one wife means you're effectively still a jati. Jati means somebody who's in control of their sexual desires. So going beyond that would not be, recommended at all. What the key teaching there would be that lust, most people, most cultures now are treating lust as something that cannot be controlled, and so you must allow people an avenue to express that. And in fact, you often see literature that's unhealthy to allow people not to, experiment before marriage and things like this. And that's where I think maybe the medical can come in from, maybe, because people say, well, it's unhealthy to suppress people so much, therefore you've got to let them express themselves. If they don't express themselves, you get all these unhealthy urges and, raping and stuff going on. I think that takes a very dim view of what a human being is actually capable of. We believe that if you can connect to the divine, and all of us have this center at the top of our head, we can meditate. And if we do that early morning, before we face the day, it's like taking a lot of medicine first thing in the morning. And that allows you to kind of shield yourself off from the 5 things we talked about, which is lust, anger, greed, pride, and attachment. So those are the things that we're trying to fight from the Sikh medical point of view, and these can be controlled. And so therefore, many times a Sikh enters into marriage primarily because this is the family life that Guru Sahib recommended, that we don't just escape from this world and become monks up in the mountains. Now many religions do have a monastic element, and in many ways Sikhi, in its aim, in a spiritual aim, is very much like what the monks are trying to do. But a lot of those monks are great people, but they're not involved in society. So the society doesn't get a benefit of those people because they're away from society. So actually marriage is seen as the optimal route, but many Sikhs do want to escape from the world and go and meditate, but we're told to stay within it.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the next question is, does your faith encourage seeking Western drug treatments or more traditional treatments? Can there be a balance struck between the two? And I'll start that question off with Dr. Stern.
Well, I would take my lead from a recognized authority. You know, there is a side of mysticism in all serious religion which is absolutely essential, and it exists in Judaism. But taking my lead from Rabbi Yehuda Pink, it is a duty to seek treatments for which there is proper evidence. In other words, despite the fact that the Jewish religion is so ancient, it is very much in tune with modern criteria about what is proper and what is improper treatment.
Thank you, Dr. Stern. Jagraj?
Yeah, I mean, Sikhi would say that there needs to be a balance between the two. It's very much about a holistic approach. So if you look at the gurus, they learned about Ayurveda, which is a recognized science now. There's people who are doing, you know, doctor degrees in Ayurvedic science. It's not all mumbo jumbo. Lots many people raised from the Western idea look at that and think it's very strange. But there's many things, like for example, if you had a cough, you then wouldn't eat things that were going to be cold for your throat, like yogurt. And even now, I think society would say, well, that you wouldn't do that because it actually hurts your cough and makes it worse. So we would definitely recommend a holistic approach. And obviously, when you say Western medicine, it's a bit too broad, because there's kind of pills, and then there's, you know, operations which should be developed in the West. So we would say, look, what works is good, but alcohol would not be really recommended unless it was for medicinal purposes. So I think sometimes you have cough syrups that have alcohol inside them, and in which case Sikhi would say, well, it might be permissible, but, you know, sitting there with a beer saying, this is my medicine, no. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Rafaka?
From the Islamic point of view, one of the most important things is about the concept of haqq, which is truth and certainty. So Islam really thrives on this idea of something being certain. For that reason, there are quite a number of elements you'll find in some of the books related to Islamic law and various other elements around that, where whenever it talks about certain medicine being permitted, even medicine that would normally not be considered as permissible for you to take, solely because it's not halal, that it actually advises that you go to an experienced doctor. And if that experienced doctor suggests that this is the right thing for you, so there's an understanding that there is an authority and an element of experience that exists there, where you can go and they can advise you. One thing it does do is recognize that element of authority, recognizes the element of research, and reaching that limit of certainty. When there is a lot of clear evidence that certain medications do work, then Islam actually encourages you to take it. There's a very clear statement, but do not take your hands to your own destruction. And I've come a number of times where you have the odd patient who's quite fatalistic and feels that Allah tawakkal, trust in God, and therefore I don't need to do all this. Whereas the clear dimension of that is, if you end up harming yourself, then that is something that goes against what Islam is trying to teach you. So taking medicine, whether it be Western medicine, to define it as Western medicine is not the issue, it's just the fact that you're seeking treatment. The Quran is a form of treatment as well. It says Quran hudan wa shifa. The Quran is a guidance, a spiritual guidance, and also a form of physical cure and spiritual cure as well. So there are elements that you find where Muslims actually recite verses of the Quran as a form of healing as well.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Nat?
Well, you medics at Leicester, you'll be very aware of the triple diagnosis and biopsychosocial pain. You'll also be aware that in palliative care, there are 4 different kinds of pain: physical pain, social pain, emotional pain, and spiritual pain. And within the Christian tradition, people are seen not just as being bodies, but their kind of minds, hearts, their spirits, and their physical bodies, and they live in a community. So when you're looking at medicines aren't just drugs, they're any kind of intervention you do to promote wholeness. So if you're looking at the physical body, Christianity would want to do good, not harm, to love your neighbours. So there need to be evidence-based, you'd need to know they worked. If you're looking at emotional pain, you're probably looking at things like counselling and other interventions to try and help the person cope with that emotional pain that's there. If you're looking at social pain, you're looking at probably helping build up restored relationships. But I think what's quite special about Christianity is looking at spiritual pain and the fact that we have, in the Christian tradition, all sinned. And therefore we experience spiritual pain because we're not in relationship with God. And the key thing again in Christianity is the whole thing about forgiveness, that sins can actually be forgiven. So you're looking at the person as a whole being. Medicine aren't just drugs, and there's different types of things that need treating: body, mind, spirit, and also the social environment that we're in.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the next question is more about the future. So medical research is focusing more and more on genetics, understanding it and how to manipulate it for medical and survival benefit. In light of this, and given the various beliefs about creation of life, etc., how will religion fit in with medicine in the future? And in brackets, surely religion's role will diminish. So, Dr. Rafal?
Quite the opposite, really. I don't think religion's role will diminish in any form or manner, but rather I think I see a lot of these new discoveries as a case study for how that particular faith, and I talk about all faiths, I'm not expressing the details of the other faiths, but from an Islamic point of view, it's a case study of how Islam is applied to that particular case study. So even the concepts of cloning and genetical sort of interventions, medical interventions, there is a role for that, but it has to be very clear that that role clearly identifies some element of benefit. If the harms, there's a certain maxim from the Islamic point of view which we talk about, where the lesser of the two evils. So if the benefit of such a therapy quite clearly outweighs the harms of such a therapy, then that would be permitted. Again, there are certain conditions and principles. One of the conditions would be that it ensures that the linealogy of the progeny, if it's a child, is clearly drawn from the fact that it's a married couple. That's a very important part of this. Also, the fact that no one else is harmed as a result of that particular individual, if there is some kind of genetical intervention that's being done. So there is a very clear concept that is used from the Islamic point of view called darar, which is called harm. The other is called mashaqqa, which is called any form of injury or any kind of difficulty or hardship. In those particular instances, then there are certain elements of what we call a rukhsa, a consensus, where the scholars basically accept that such a therapy is permissible. So it really depends on what particular therapy that is and what it compromises.
Can we have Dr. Knight?
I don't think you've watched Jurassic Park. There's a lovely phrase in it, my character who's played by Jeff Goldblum: just because science says we can doesn't mean we should. And we live in an age where there's loads of technological developments. We can, we want, we've got money to pay for it. The big question is should we? And what religion and what Christianity, from my perspective of this, is something to help us decide what we should and what we shouldn't do. Now, the Bible doesn't mention cloning, it doesn't mention IVF or anything else like that, but it does mention that man is made in the image of God. Each human being is unique and special, and whether you're earning £1 billion a year or whether you are an old lady with dementia, you're equally valuable. Therefore, research that actually compromises the dignity of the human being is something that we couldn't accept. So if you're looking at research that's going to undermine the value of human being, that Christianity would not be permissible. So you can't say blanket, all technological development's bad, because it doesn't work that way. But developments that actually compromise that unique individual's dignity are types of research that Christianity would have problems with justifying.
Okay, and Jabraj?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think God remains the creator, because that doesn't change, whether we start to do cloning or not. Human beings have always taken part in some kind of genetic engineering, whether it's some animals or, the Greeks having kind of selective births. What we would say is that everything is effectively at this level should be decided on a case-by-case basis. So in many ways we have this concept called the Panch Pyare, that society is designed to be, should be, when we have an issue like this, it should be referred to in a consensus of 5 people, obviously who are educated and know the area and also are spiritual beings, not just people who are involved maybe in non-spirituality but practicing spiritualists. The main guiding principles for society remain compassion and justice. So one of the reasons, for example, that in any Gurdwara you get free food is because God is compassionate and then wants to fulfill your basic needs. So if this thing we're going to, let's say somebody tomorrow decides to make some kind of a human-robot hybrid that had no emotions and that was able to be trained to be a killer, but then that would be going against the principle of compassion, because that thing doesn't have any compassion. So you wouldn't then go for that, because why would you make something that had no compassion? Yeah, when compassion is a main thing that human beings have, and that allows justice to come upon the earth. So again, it's based upon the guiding principles, because the world isn't black or white. You can't make all the laws, and human beings are given the ability to use their brain, but in a consensus environment, looking at the principles of compassion and justice.
Thank you.
I think this is really a very perceptive and very searching question, which gets to the heart of everything we're talking about. In terms of, for example, a diabetic patient for whom the only available treatment is pork insulin, in Judaism there is absolutely no issue. If that's necessary for saving life, that's fine. It's not a food anyway, so that has been faced and we know how to deal with that. But in my training, I spent some years working for a wonderful endocrinologist who used to shout out during his lectures to the medical students, all women think their breasts are too small, all men think their breasts are too big, and things like that. We do have an issue where large numbers of people in the UK today are having surgical operations to make their bodies conform to something that they wish to have. And sometimes when you talk to these patients, you cannot, they don't see it as a fashion preference. They see it as something they absolutely need. Very strange. So when the question refers to genetics, that gets very worrying. The possibility that in the Jeff Goldblum sense, it will become possible to incorporate some ape genes into a human being so that they're stronger or faster or can jump higher or something like that, I think does raise real issues which people of religion are going to have to face. And I believe they will have to make some pronouncements on that. And I don't know all the answers. I would quote my near neighbour, Dr. Tek Kong, who says he prefers unanswered questions to unquestioned answers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stern. You have made me quite self-conscious. Okay. So the next question, I've got a couple of questions which all kind of fit together. So firstly, what is the religious view of mental health? And that covers most mental health diagnoses such as depression, schizophrenia, and its treatment as well. And the second part of the question is religion protective against mental health issues, especially depression? So I think I'll start that one off with Dr. Stern.
Well, first of all, I think all of us will be very well aware that generally people who have strong religious faith on the whole have better mental health than people who don't. And people who are psychologically troubled can often benefit from starting to learn about and to observe the religion of their own particular tradition. Of course, from a practical point of view, that's intensely problematic, because there can be intense resentment on the part of people in hospital administrations and other parts of society who might be very trigger happy about accusing a doctor of crossing a boundary of propriety and trying to recommend something, make propaganda for a particular religion in a possibly inappropriate way. So I think there are very sensitive issues there, but it is an important thing that we have to think about. The other issue that crops up is that often people, there are definitely mental illnesses that express themselves in a kind of religious way, as a kind of pseudo-religion. And I think that is an issue for ministers of religion. They may be confronted with people who have strong religious beliefs that are in fact the expression of a mental illness. I think that's an issue. There are many issues. In general, again, I mean, the view taken by Jewish ethicists is to use the best knowledge and science that is available. When expertise is required, we go to the people who are experts, and we don't create amateur expertise on the basis of scriptures. I mean, obviously there are principles which have to be followed, but there has to be a sensible balance. You mustn't transgress your religion, but at the same time you mustn't practice a kind of bad amateur medicine on patients.
Thank you very much. And Chakraj?
Okay, so Sikhi primarily is trying to deal with the idea of it's deal with the mind. The main focus of Sikhi, really, or Sikhism. Well, Sikhism is the word used by the West, but we call it Sikhi. Is trying to transform the mind. So there's loads of Bani about the mind and about the different stages of the mind. And in fact, as far as we're concerned, the soul or the mind is almost separate from the physical body, in a way. And they interact, obviously, much like Descartes was concerned about how the interaction happens. We believe it's up here. But that the soul can actually, leave the body at certain times. You can have various states of spiritual progress, various states of meditative levels. And I think there was a study I was reading just yesterday about University of Toronto, and they looked into the minds of long-term meditators and what happens to their minds and how their brain patterns actually change, because they no longer get involved in things that are, flitting around, but they kind of back to their focus on their long-term aims and trying to stay on the path of meditation. Now, obviously, for us, the main thing the human mind was made to do was to connect to the divine. And so when there is mental illness, which is like depression or schizophrenia, an element of that would be that that person isn't connecting. Now, let's say that person is connecting to the divine and yet still has problems, then obviously there are chemical reasons as well, because people often suffer from diseases that are not just physical, but are that chemical as well. And so in that case, we wouldn't have a problem with, taking medicine. Obviously, there are different forms of medicine and different treatments that are available, not just Western kind of chemical treatment, but other treatments. So we definitely promote the idea of a holistic treatment. So being healthy is very important in Sikhi. Gurus are always trying to, the second Guru, in fact, Guru Angad Dev Ji, they built a wrestling gym where the Sikhs were encouraged to wrestle. The Gurus were warriors, they fought, they were healthy, they encouraged people to do swimming and running. So in which case, if somebody's not taking enough exercise, in fact nowadays they talk about people who got heart disease or people who are depression, they say that you prescribe medicine off actually doing exercise. So that would be one part. And then also the people you hang out with, Sangat we call it, your company, that determines a lot of your mental health. If you're hanging out with people that are thinking in a negative way, that's going to take your thinking and your mental health negatively. Whereas if you hang out with people that are very positive, that are trying to meditate, connect to the divine, that's going to help you on the positive side. So a holistic approach to things, if chemicals if need be, but also the main purpose being to connect to divine through meditation.
Thank you very much. Dr. Knight?
I think I'd agree, first of all, what was heard earlier, the evidence seems to be that if you have got a religious faith, that your mental health tends to be better. From a Christian perspective, mental health issues, just like any physical health issues, were not God's plan. God created the world perfectly, we mucked it up. So it's a consequence of what we've done as mankind, that sin's entered the world and illness is there. I think that if you look within the Bible itself, you can see mental health issues in some of the characters. I'm sure a chap called Jeremiah had depression, and Elijah was seen to be suicidal at one point as well. And we find Nebuchadnezzar became mentally unwell as well. It sounds a bit like some kind of psychosis that he had, but you can see characters in the Bible with mental health issues. And a Christian response would very much be about compassion and about love and about wanting to help people to get better. But the other thing I think you get from Christianity as well is this whole issue about social justice, because if you look at the funding for mental health in the UK, it really is inadequate. Mental health issues are a huge part of general practice training, general practice work, and also a huge part of the work we do within the hospitals. Depression is incredibly common. And actually, it's something there about advocacy, and I think Christianity, again, social justice, advocacy, let's get some money where we need it, so that these patients actually get the health care that they actually need. Another word of warning, I work as Royal College of GPs, clinical lead in health for healthcare professionals. You as potential doctors are high risk of mental health issues yourself, because the work that you do actually can compromise your own mental health. You're there to care, you're there to have empathy, you're there to have compassion in a system that actually doesn't let you do it so well. And also, I'm afraid, you also tend to be a bit perfectionist, a bit over-conscientious, and you expect a bit too much of yourselves, and I'm speaking to myself as well. And the second commandment I mentioned in my talk was love your neighbour as yourself. There's an element of their responsibility that comes from Christianity, looking after yourself to be able to love your neighbour.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Abakar?
I think from the Islamic point of view, one of the fundamental verses that relate to good mental health is the verse that says, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub," which refers to the fact that through the remembrance of Allah, hearts feel content. And that is the fundamental focus about being of sound mind, and that is contentment. Islam recognizes that as the soul of good mental health. When you are content with your life, when you are content with those things that are around you, regardless of how much wealth you have, how much luxuries you have, even if you have very little luxury, very little amenities and facilities, you are content with it. And that's a fundamental drive that even the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, actually drove in terms of the whole concept of what he was trying to explain to the people around him. Now, within that, for that reason, a lot what you see within the Islamic domain is all to do with preventative means and preventative manners to ensure that that contentment exists. And for that reason, there are two domains in Islam. One is about what we call huquq Allah, which are the rights and responsibilities we have to God. And that's in terms of our worship and various other things. And then the other element is huquq al-ibad. And that is in terms of the rights and responsibilities we have to the others, people around us. So in Islam, the preventative element is solely about how you interact with the people around you. For that reason, the internal purification element is an absolutely essential component. So in terms of ensuring that you do not talk bad of somebody, that you do not wrong somebody, you be just, do not demonstrate jealousy, hatred, both. There are many sort of concepts used here. Imam Ghazali is somebody who, some of you may have heard of him, is somebody who's written a lot about this. And there have been many scholars who've talked a lot about Islam and psychology. It's a humongous subject. Even today, it's becoming a very large and increasing subject. There's a lot of literature out there about it. So it's something worthwhile referring to.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question, again, there's a number of questions here that all relate to specific aspects of medical ethics. So one question was specifically to Dr. Stern, which is, your talk was very inspiring, And you say that Judaism is in line with modern technology, yet why do Orthodox Jews still reject blood transfusions? So including that question, I'm just going to ask each speaker to talk about, very quickly, organ donation, blood transfusions and abortion. So I'll start with Dr. Stan.
The idea of an Orthodox Jew refusing a blood transfusion is total news to me. I mean, that is just inconceivable. I can't exclude the possibility that such people exist, but it certainly isn't normal within Orthodox Judaism. Of course, we all, from time to time, have to treat Jehovah's Witnesses who do have that principle and who will approach you as a doctor right from the word go. I am coming here to get treatment from you. Will you please, first of all, undertake that under no circumstances you will give me a blood transfusion? The Jehovah's Witnesses will put that to you. And I have certainly had such patients, and I have agreed to that because it is an adult, a sane adult's freedom and right in this country to make their own decisions. And freedom of decision involves, I believe, the freedom to do things that I consider stupid. I don't agree with it, but it is their freedom. So it's not an issue for Orthodox Judaism, but it is an issue we sometimes have to face.
Thank you very much. And Jagraj?
Yeah. Three very big topics. You threw an abortion at the end there. So just quickly, yeah. So blood transfusions. Again, I said that earlier in my talk, but Sikhs wouldn't have a problem with it because it's just it's fine. We haven't got a problem because there's no such concept like that the body's going to be reformed. We're dead and then we burn the body, and then we're judged straight away. So there's no day of judgment anyway. So I'm not sure whether I'd actually know much about this. Only recently I started finding out that Jehovah's Witnesses and other religions don't allow it. So we haven't got a problem with it. Organ transplants, again, it's the same thing. The body is temporary. If you can benefit somebody else after you've gone, then that's a great thing. So in fact, most Sikhs would recommend it, and there's quite a lot of drives right now in order for people to kind of register as blood donors or with the Anthony Nolan Trust. When it comes to abortion, I have to say that it's not something that Sikhism has a defined view on, because again, although we are a young faith, we've been in the last 50 or 60 odd years when abortions become quite common. We've been under attack in many ways. We've been denied our own country in India, and so we haven't had a chance to kind of deal with these things at a united level. But we can take principles from the Sikh faith and the examples to kind of give a view on it. And that's, again, I'm just saying that because I want to clarify that this is my view and not the view of Sikhism. Firstly, what is life? Well, life is an opportunity to experience the divine. Yeah. So before you can decide to end a life, you must, or end a fetus's life, you must then think, what is life itself? So its life is here to experience the divine. Therefore, it's not a decision which should be taken very lightly. And I know there's a lot of research into this right now that actually, in fact, doctors tend not to ask too many questions if somebody wants to get an abortion. And I don't think that's right. But the other side of that is if you are going to force someone to hold a baby to term or carry a baby and they don't want to, then you make sure you give them the other alternatives, because what you don't want to do is get into a position where you are forcing people to do something they don't want to, but you don't help them in the principle of compassion to actually deal with that. So if somebody's been raped and they don't want to have that child, then the state or the environment that makes that law should then provide adequate care for that child, so the person doesn't have to maybe bring them up, but at least hasn't killed that child off. Yeah. One of the things that's interesting from our Sikh history is that the Guru absolutely forbade the killing of a child because it was a girl. Now, obviously, that used to happen before in many cultures, where after the baby was born. But now we have a situation where people can work it out even before the baby is born, what sex-selective abortion, and that would be totally against Sikhism. In fact, the rule is very clear. If you do that, if you kill a girl because it's a girl, you're no longer a Sikh. Yeah, you're out of the religion. You're excommunicated immediately. So just on that note, it would be about whether what the reason for the abortion was. Now, if a child is not well, is not going to be able to survive, then that's a question which is separate, because again, it's case by case. And I would say that, you know, people who are medically knowledgeable and spiritually orientated as a group should make a collective decision on a case by case basis. So there's no specific laws. But again, that allows for that, the fact that human beings have intellect and that they are spiritual, and like you said earlier, made in the image of God, we can become divine. You know, we can become enlightened, and enlightened beings tend to make decisions on the line of compassion, on justice, which are the key principles. And collectively, 5 people especially is a number given to us. Collectively, one person might make mistakes, but 5 together can come to a good consensus, you know, about the truth.
Thank you very much.
Looking at blood transfusions, I don't think there's a real problem for most Christians. Looking at organ donation, got a friend who's a renal transplant surgeon. I think transplants, when appropriate, I can't see that many Christians would disagree with. I think what you will find, though, there's discussions about definitions of death. And is death brain death? Is it non-heart-beating death? Because that's where organs tend to be taken from. So there'll be concern there. So, for example, there have been stories, for example, in China where prisoners have been executed and their organs have been reaped and stuff like that. So there's a few concerns about who you take the organs from, but the transplant itself, possibly not so much a big issue if it's taken from someone who's actually died, or someone who's decided to give it an organ, a kidney, for example. Abortion gets very complicated, and it's really interesting because if you're having a discussion about abortion, often you find in the media it's religious groups that have played that religious groups are the only people that are against abortion, and you get blanket stereotypes used. Actually, I'm a GP, and I haven't come across any of my colleagues who are happy with abortion. They might have different moral standpoints for when they're happy to refer a patient for an abortion, and they can vary, but it doesn't seem to be a religious reason for lots of them. Looking at Christianity, again, you'll find a variation. In one of the Psalms, it says, "For you created my inmost being, I praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made." So in the Bible, you've got a beautiful description about the worth of an unborn child. And so the worth of an unborn child, for many Christians, is equal to the worth of the mother. So then you get into this whole situation, whose rights actually triumph, which is what the world talks about. Then you get very hard situations where the mother's life is at risk. For example, the mother's got cancer and needs to have chemotherapy. Then you get situations where women are choosing to have an abortion because they have no choice. And I've had that said so many times to me, and I'm thinking, hang on, the secular argument for abortion is women's choice. But this woman in front of me is saying, I have no choice. That goes back to what you were saying about society making it possible for women to have children if they wanted to carry on having them. When does life begin also links in with this as well. And with a Christian perspective, you'll get some people that will argue for life beginning at conception. Some Christians will take more of a gradualist approach. So you're not going to find one size actually meets all. But one key thing that most Christians would agree with is the unborn child is unique and special and fearfully and wonderfully made.
Thank you. And Dr. Rafat?
From the Islamic point of view, there are, again, a number of principles in relation to that. There's a couple of verses within the Quran that very clearly epitomize the whole concept of blood transfusions, organ transplantations, and the idea of abortions as well. The first is وَلَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. And this basically refers to God basically saying that we have honoured mankind. And for that reason, the human body is sacrosanct. And to actually violate the human body in any form or manner would go against the whole idea of what Islam is trying to encourage us to do. So on that basis, giving blood solely for benefit, where you're benefiting another, is considered a virtuous act. But if there's an element where you are wasting blood as a result, and there are some elements sometimes where there are blood banks and blood is wasted, on that basis sometimes it's not looked good at, because then you're wasting a part of the human body. Now, the same sort of concept applies to donating organs as well. Now, there is a kind of a consensus by a number of resolutions by a number of ulama, religious scholars, who talk about organ transplantation. And one of the things that they put forward is the verse where it says, "Man qatala nafsan bighayri nafsin faka'innama qatala an-nasa jami'an." That person who basically kills somebody wrongfully, it's like he has killed the whole of mankind. And then he refers to "Man ahya an-nasa faka'annama ahya an-nasa jami'an." That person who gives life to somebody, it is as if he's given life to the whole of mankind. So on that basis, if you look at both those concepts, they play hand in hand on the basis that if it's solely for you to give somebody a new life, then there is a virtuous act to even give an organ. There are conditions that are placed within that in terms of exploitation and various other elements that need to be considered. Now, that same verse relates to the idea of abortion. Now, for those of you who have some understanding of Islam, one of the things that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was very adamant about was this concept, and it was an Arabian tradition where there was infanticide was a quite common practice, where young girls were basically killed, so because their crime being that they are female. And the Prophet ﷺ was vehemently against that, and he completely stopped that practice throughout the whole Arabian Peninsula, on a very serious note. That's one element, and there's a verse in the Quran that refers to that. The other element is this idea about taking life. Life is very important in Islam. To take somebody's life is a very serious issue. Now, the Quran sort of has the Quran is not a book of science; it's a book of guidance. But within that, there are domains in there which relate to science. And one particular element of that is the embryological phase, how the fetus grows, and it actually talks about the stages in detail of how the fetus grows, which correlates to scientific discovery. So it talks about there being 3 phases, and it talks about there being nutfa, alaqa, mudgha, and these are the 3 phases of fetal growth. And the first phase is basically the sort of the gamete phase. Then we have what we call the clot phase, and then there's a phase where we call the flesh phase. And the flesh phase, it describes as having sort of tooth marks, or kind of imprint of teeth, which is very similar to the somites that we have on growing fetus. So it talks a lot about that in detail. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also described and explained in his tradition, he explained that the fetus, the ensoulment process occurs approximately 120 days, where the ruh is blown into the fetus. In other words, that fetus now becomes a person. And on that basis, the conditions and the strictness in terms of taking a life of a fetus become much more stringent once they reach that particular ensoulment period. So that generally talks about the sort of the issue regarding abortion. There is a process what we call azl, which is referring to the use of contraception and the stage prior to that 120 days, where contraception is permitted, but yet not to be taken lightly. So you can use contraception, but you need a valid reason to do it. Once they reach the stage of ensoulment, then that is a life, and for that reason there is some element of sacrosanct in there. Now, like I talked about before, the concept of balance of benefit and harm, if there is harm, serious harm to the mother, then on that particular element there'll be rukhsah, there'll be some concession that where a mother will be able to abort. But other than that, there is a lot of stringent conditions in how we do that.
Okay, thank you very much. I do realise that was a bit of a really fast talk through medical ethics, but we could be here all day discussing it, to be honest with you, so I think we'll move on to other questions. Okay, so this question relates to most faiths have a belief that God gave us the perfect form. So if that's the case, then why do we tamper with the body in terms of circumcision, cutting the hair, that sort of stuff? So I think I'll start that one off with Dr. Nag.
Within Christianity, we don't have circumcision. What you have got in the Hebrew scriptures in the Old Testament and the New Testament is the concept of circumcision of the heart, which is more about God indwelling the human being through His Holy Spirit and transforming him to be more like Jesus. So we don't have rules and regulations about circumcision for Christians.
Certainly can't really answer that question properly. Obviously, in Judaism, circumcision for males is a absolute requirement, unless there is a health contraindication, in which case it's forbidden. In Judaism, we talk about two kinds of laws. One is a law like don't steal, don't murder. They are very much like ordinary human civil laws. And another set of laws like don't eat pork, for which the reason isn't known to us. We can speculate about reasons, but we have to recognize that we don't know. And so people speculate about the reason for circumcision. Is it a reminder that we have to behave with sexual propriety in our lives, to restrain our instincts and behave in a civilized way? That is one explanation I've heard from a rabbi. But firstly, I'm not scholarly enough to answer that question in detail. And secondly, I do know that no Jewish expert who is taken seriously believes that we know the answer, however much we can speculate.
Thank you. And Dr. Hafid?
I think one particular explanation to this would be that in Islam there's a recognition of what we call a fitra state. And fitra state means a state which has not been tampered with. And the fitra state, from the Islamic perspective, is a state whereby we recognize that state as something that Abraham, or we call Ibrahim, alayhi salam, the Prophet Abraham, had basically initiated. And God had basically revealed revelation for him to do that. Within that fitra state, again, like I talked about earlier, is the element of prevention. So one component to being in the fitra state is to remain in that state as much as possible through the act of prevention. And the act of prevention suggests that there are certain things that we should do as Muslims. Part of that is in relation to even cutting your nails, so making sure your nails are not long. And that's solely on the basis of hygiene. Then there are elements of ensuring that the pubic hairs or hairs of maturity around the armpits and various other areas, that they are cut as well, or they are removed for that particular purpose as well. Then within that, there's also the issue of circumcision. Now, the circumcision sort of has a balance on two elements. One element is about elements of hygiene, which Islam recognizes is a form of hygiene. The other element within that is the balance of following the concept and the fitra and the generality of the Abrahamic faith. That the Prophet Abraham, he did it, and as a result it's a symbol for Muslims that they do the same. So there's a number of little elements within that. Going back to the fitra state suggests from Islam, which differs slightly from the Christian view, that man is born completely pure and sinless. And it's only through the impurities of the earth and our involvement with the earth that we become sinful and various other things. So the fitra state is a form of physical, outward reformation to ensure that we are in a clean state. And that is also, the most importantly, is the internal state, which we need to clean through not sinning and not causing harm to people, etc. So from that point of view, circumcision plays a role within that external state as opposed to internal state.
Interesting question. With circumcision, obviously, regardless male or female, Sikhs do not practice any form of circumcision, nor do we, agree with any kind of piercings or even tattoos. Just let the body be as it is, and no cutting of hair as well. So, in that sense, Sikhs are happy to accept how God made us. It's interesting because if you look at animals, they don't tend to have hair on top of their head. Even monkeys, they just keep the same kind of hair across their whole body. But it's human beings that are blessed with this abundant hair on our head. Obviously, with internal circumcision, one of the things that's happening right now, I'm sure it's a concern to Jewish community, Islamic community, is that countries like Germany have now made circumcision illegal, and that in the UK they're thinking about doing the same thing, that it's not right for a child to be circumcised, in the sense that it's a violation of the child's rights. Now, we obviously don't have to worry about that, but I get the idea why other people might be concerned. We're more about accepting God's will. Now, when it comes to hair, simply because many holy people in the past have had long hair. In fact, I believe the Prophet Muhammad had long hair and a beard as well. Many Jewish saints are shown with a turban and beard. We believe that just men are made this way. Yeah, men just have beards, and they're supposed to look, it's quite a manly look. And we keep our hair. Now, one of the things about our hair, which is something special for human beings, as I said to you, that we're blessed with this abundant hair, is that actually there's a verse of Japji Sahib which says that if I had one tongue, I'd praise your name. If you gave me more tongues, if you gave me, say, 1,000, 100,000 tongues, or you gave me 20 hundreds or 2 million tongues, I will still praise your name. Now, how does that become real for a human being? Is when the person starts to meditate so much that every breath starts to say God's name. So every second they're breathing, they're saying God's name, and they're meditating upon God. And actually, it absorbs into the body so much that every hair starts to vibrate with God's name. And so Mara says, Gurmukha Rom Rom Hartyave. That a Gurmukh, a person is enlightened, every hair on their body, this is a Rom, as opposed to the occasion I heard, starts to meditate upon God's name. And that's a very real experience. It's not a physical thing that you can describe to somebody. It's hard to explain. The experience of God transcends to every pore of our body, is actually meditating upon God's name. And that person is like a walking temple to God. And therefore, we do not violate the body in that way by cutting it. Now, when it comes to hygiene, it's interesting because many people look at the Sikhs who keep their hair and they say, oh, it's unnecessary. But I want to address this point specifically on hygiene, because I often get this from people who think it's not hygiene to keep your hair. Well, you said earlier about like the rules of hygiene in Islam. One of the things that our Guru is very clear about is that you must bathe every day, and also a person must brush their teeth twice a day as well, and comb their hair. So one of the 5 articles of faith is actually a comb. And I imagine that's a strange article to have, right? But we're not allowed, because we keep long hair, we're not allowed to have dreadlocks, because you can't comb those. So we must keep our hair clean, washed, and able to comb through. And obviously, giving our head is covered up. The pollution in today's modern society of cars and obviously no cigarette smoke, then our hair stays quite clean. One of the things for Sikhs hold, though, is that we can't cut any of our pubic hair, because we can't cut any of our hair anyway. And in a way, I think that actually is very liberating for a woman not to have to conform to the modern ideals, where many women are then told that anything about you which denotes you're a woman as opposed to a prepubescent girl is not acceptable. Yeah. Whereas Sikhs would say, look, you're a woman, you're meant to have hair. Baby girls don't have hair, but women have hair. Just accept it. And then it's obviously an injunction put upon men as well, that it's often men that then tell women what's womanly or not. Whereas here, a man is told, accept her for as she is. So it works for both ways. So Sikh men are expecting to marry a woman who looks like a woman as opposed to like a girl. Yeah. So I don't think there's anything to do with hygiene. I think it's more just to accept God's will, because often society spends too much time worrying about the outside, and this is specifically in today's world. It's so obsessed with the outwardly look, and actually that detracts from our spiritual progress, because this body is just it's like a cloth for the soul. Yeah, the word used is like a cloth. So these clothes are going to be cast away anyway at some point, right? And just like we cast away our clothes every day and we put them in the wash, in the same way this body is going to be cast away, but the soul has been around for a long time, and the soul is here to connect the divine. And the more we can get away from the external, the more we can look internal, is the better for all of us. I mean, mentally, yeah, and physically, we can start to go inwards.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think looking at the time, I'm going to keep it to the last 2 questions now. So the first one, I'm paraphrasing from 3 questions here. It's all about exogenous agents introduced into the body. So that includes both medical drugs, such as opioids and other intoxicant drugs that might be used for medical purposes, and that also includes recreational drugs such as marijuana and smoking. So what is your religion's view on each one of those. So I think I'll start that one off with Dr. Stan.
Well, certainly there is no problem about taking an extraneous substance if it is necessary for preserving life or health. A Jew should not get drunk. On the other hand, the consumption of alcohol is part of the Jewish religion. In the old days, there used to be Jews who took a vow not to cut their hair and not to consume alcohol for a specific period. They would do that for atonement for something they had done wrong, for example. And when that period came to an end, the person who did that, who was called a Nazarite, and the example in the Bible is Samson, had to bring a sacrifice in the temple to atone for having denied himself a permitted pleasure. But, I mean, we drink alcohol on a Sabbath at the end of the service, and it's a tiny quantity of very low alcohol wine. It has a high sugar content, that's how it doesn't go bad. And the reason for drinking it is that there is a specific blessing for saying that wine was one of the products of that part of the world, and we bless the Almighty for creating that. So we actually drink the wine in order to say the blessing. There is one very curious rule, though, in Judaism, which puzzles not only me, but vast numbers of other Jews. It is a saying that on the night of Purim, which commemorates a time when the Persians tried to kill all the Jews on one day in the entire Persian Empire, and the plot was defeated and the Jews survived. And we have a celebratory festival, which we're quite close to. And on the night before that festival, there is a ruling that a man is supposed to drink so much that he can't tell the difference between saying, "Blessed is Mordechai," Mordechai being the Jew who defeated the plot, and "Cursed be Haman," Haman being the man who hatched the plot. And that rule is observed more in the breach than in the observance, in my experience. I have never seen a Jew really drunk, as that rule appears to say. And I think many Jews interpret it in quite a different way. And I think ultimately the interpretation is that Haman, the evil person, and Mordechai, the good person, were both human beings. They were both creatures of the Almighty, and that the inability to tell the difference should really be an observance of that fact, that we need to treat even our enemies as human beings. So that's just highlighting a puzzling feature of Judaism. But the use of recreational drugs, of course, is totally forbidden. I mean, even smoking is frowned on for that reason in strictly Orthodox Judaism, although you will see Orthodox Jews smoke chain smoking. I mean, not all Jews are the same. Not all Orthodox Jews are the same by a very long stretch.
Thank you very much. And Jagraj?
Okay. Medicinal drugs obviously are quite important because they help us to survive, and there's no problem with using something for medicine. In fact, it's funny because, you know, the Punjabi word for alcohol, daru, is also actually the word for medicine as well. So people often saw that as medicine for themselves. Now that's a Punjabi thing, not a Sikh thing. Let me just clarify that. However, for example, alcohol is used in many places to purify, like to wash out bloods and kill germs, right? So in that case, within war or within a time of medical needs, that would be okay to use alcohol. However, alcohol is not to be drunk in order to get drunk, not to be consumed in order to get drunk. Now, the gurus are very clear that there is a bliss that we look for, but we look for it in the wrong place. The bliss of the experience of the divine, we call Anand. Unfortunately, we end up looking for it in alcohol and drugs because they're more immediate, and this one takes a bit more time. It's kind of like when you want to dig a well, and you want to get water, and you might have to dig down a long time to get pure water from the ground, but you could just go down to the river, but the water might not be good for you, but you might just go for that because it's on top and it's easily available. Yeah. So inside us is the well of the experience of the divine, but it's hard to get there. But the effort is definitely worth it because it leaves you with no hangover and you get unlimited bliss, as much as you want, and it's free. Recreational drugs obviously are not allowed in that sense. One of the key things for us is tobacco is never allowed. And in fact, tobacco is one of the 4 things that you would never do as a Sikh. So any kind of smoking is definitely not allowed. Shisha, again, not allowed. Tobacco is a major injunction within Sikhi. Alcohol might be allowed in terms of war or in terms of, to kind of, as a painkiller if you need to be operated on, but never would alcohol be allowed, would smoking be allowed. And again, people take drugs to get high, but you can get high off Naam, of God's name. So why go for a lower high than a better high?
Thank you very much. Dr.
I think we'll tackle this in 3 different ways. First of all, in Christianity, one of the meals we share as Christians is the Last Supper, which is a meal of bread and wine. And that really builds on what happened to the Jews in Egypt when they left Egypt and they had a Passover supper where a lamb was sacrificed, and the Jews were able to escape from Egypt, from Pharaoh, but they also were able to escape the punishment of death, because before the Jews left Egypt, the angel of death went over Egypt and all the firstborn sons died. But for the Jews in Egypt at the time, if they killed and sacrificed the lamb and put the blood of the lamb over the doorpost and on the side and ate it all up, the firstborn sons of the Jews didn't die. Within Christianity, you then have Jesus, who comes as a saviour, and Jesus is crucified on the cross. And in Christianity, we believe that he died for us and for our sins. Before he did die, he had a Last Supper with his disciples, which was of bread and of wine. So wine is seen as good, and as we've heard earlier, there's a blessing that's said over the wine at Passover, and we, in Holy Communion, in the Last Supper, celebrate what Jesus has done for us. So wine is not forbidden. Next part of the story is that Christians believe that Jesus rose again, and then he ascended to be with his Father, and he left the Holy Spirit, which is God, to actually come into our lives as Christians and live with us. And there's a phrase in the New Testament about our bodies being temples of the Holy Spirit. Therefore, our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. We shouldn't be getting drunk and abusing our bodies. We need to look after them. So recreational drugs and things like that, we know can cause death. Ecstasy can cause death. They've got risks associated with them. So there's something about looking after our bodies. But another dimension to it is as well, as we know that there is addiction out there. I worked in the homeless service where alcoholism is a big problem. Also substance misuse is a big problem. And again, in the New Testament, we're guided not to lead our brother or sister into an area that's going to be difficult for them and cause them to sin. So if I was having a meal, we do have wine in our home, but I had someone who I knew had got a problem with alcohol, I wouldn't be having the alcohol out. So there's something there about caring for our neighbour and loving our neighbour in how we live and not making things difficult for them. So I hope those 3 different illustrations about Jesus drinking wine, about our bodies being temples of the Holy Spirit to look after them, but also our responsibility to care for our neighbour. And these drugs do cause problems. Alcohol does cause problems. We need to help our neighbour within that. And that therefore leads me, in my work as a doctor, to want to work with people who have got addiction type problems.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Dr.
Again, going back to the Quran, there is a verse that refers to this that the Muslim scholars generally tend to refer to, which means that do not take your hands to your own destruction. Now that's one particular component, but within that there's a couple of things that lie under this. And one of the elements that lie under that is anything that comes within the domain of being what we call muskar. Muskar meaning an intoxicant. And there is an illah meaning there's a reason why that is, and that is anything that impairs your cognition and your judgment is considered something which would not be really in essence permissible in Islam. Why? Because it affects the people around you. Just like I was talking earlier on about your huquq al-ibad, the relationship you have with the people around you, with your wife, with your husband, with your children, with the family members and people around you, your friends. Anything that would impair your judgment, which will cause detriment to them, would be considered as impermissible. Now, on that basis, it's interesting how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers in a rational way. He talks about alcohol or wine specifically. And he says that there are benefits within this and there are harms. But the harms clearly outweigh the benefits. And for that reason, it has been made haram upon you. So there's a rational argument that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents here. And the scholars use that as a form or a formula that we can use in anything which would be destructive to our health. Within that falls the concept of dururiyat al mahdurat, which is the basis of those things are a necessity that would be permitted in some instances. So on that basis, alcohol, if used for medicinal purposes, which clearly has some benefit, then in those instances it could be used solely for medicinal purposes. The Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him also said that even if there is a large amount of that intoxicant or a small amount, both are considered impermissible. Why? Because there's a precautionary measure and a preventative measure. And the essence behind that is when somebody is under the influence of alcohol, they are less likely to be able to control their inner desires, which could be of detriment. The elements of your desires which are detrimental, then for those reasons, those kind of elements which are considered as muskar are not permitted. Smoking is an interesting one, because you'll find that smoking is probably one of the highest form of recreational drug even within Muslim countries. The interesting thing about that at the moment is because of more recent research, some scholars are actually going out and saying it's impermissible to smoke for the basis that it's harmful to the body. Now that's not readily accepted within the Muslim communities because it's such a common practice and there's a lot of addiction of nicotine within those particular communities. So it's making its way through the system gradually. You'll find that even during Ramadan, when the Muslims fast, they're not allowed to smoke during the fasting period. And that really is a real incentive for them to quit smoking. So there are elements within Islam that talk about refraining from those things that are harmful and damaging to yourself. So recreational drugs that are very clearly harmful would also fall into that category as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody for coming, taking the time out. I sincerely thank all of my speakers and panel members for coming today and taking their time out to come and enlighten us about their religion. And also, I hope we have fostered some mutual respect. Because I always believe that there's differences between faiths. However, to understand and to have that mutual respect, we need to understand why those differences are there. And I hope this has achieved some of that.